Chapter 9, Agency for International Development. Author, Max Primorak, former Chief Operating Officer and Assistant to the Administrator, Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. Say-E-D, also DID, also Director Douglas and Sarah Allison Center for Foreign Policy, the Heritage Foundation. New. DES, Government's International Development and Disaster Assistance Programs. Tara Primorak lays out a radical reordering of the agency to reverse on day one of a new administration the gross misuse of foreign aid by the current administration to promote a radical ideology that is politically divisive at home and harms our global standing. Biden has decoupled assistance from free market reforms that are the keystone of economic and political stability, Primorak charges. Project 2025 calls for a radical overhaul to make up ID a pro-life agency, staffed with conservatives, funding only local NGOs and international programs aligned with pro-life values and priority conservative foreign policy objectives, and actively seeking to fund aligned faith-based groups. Primorak calls for returning to the approach begun by Trump to cut back on us, ID's foreign aid, and instead encourage countries to be self-reliant while promoting international religious freedom as a pillar of the agency work and fighting reforms related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Trump restructured the agency to provide grants to local faith-based organizations and implemented USI ID reforms to promote conservative Christian pro-life and pro-family policy. Project 2025 would go much further and deeper to extend this. Proposals include cutting USAID's global footprint to its pre-COVID 2019 budget level, de-radicalize agency programs and structures, DII, gender reforms, and realign to promote conservative Christian values and ideology. To help execute the agency reforms, authorize the USAID administrator to take on the additional role of Director of Foreign Assistance, DFAB, with the rank of Deputy Secretary at the Department of State in charge of all U.S. foreign assistance. A similar role was created under the George Bush administration and ended by Obama. In foreign policy, make China a U.S. ID priority focus and take steps to highlight the U.S. free market system V's. China's mercantilist authoritarianism to encourage other countries to economically engage with the U.S. over China. The U.S. should establish a counter-China. Infrastructure at USAID and end the climate policy fanaticism that advantages Beijing. Suggest Primorak climate policy funding reversals. Under Biden USA, IID declared itself a climate agency that has incorporated its radical climate policy into every U.S. States Primorak and redirected its private sector engagement strategy to shift away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. He proposes a sharp reversal, of course, for the next administration, arguing that globally the financial resources needed to transition away from fossil fuels are unachievable. Climate proposals include rescind all climate policies from U.S. foreign aid programs, specifically USAID's Climate Strategy 2022 to 2030. Shut down U.S. offices, programs, and directives designed to advance the Paris Climate Agreement. Narrowly limit funding to traditional climate mitigation efforts. OUSA, ID resources are best deployed to strengthen the resilience of countries that are most vulnerable to climatic shifts, Primorak argued. But ID should stop collaborating with and funding progressive foundations, corporations, international institutions, and NGOs that advocate climate fanaticism. Eliminate funding for DEI policies. Primorak levies vitriol at the integration of DA. Reforms and policies throughout USAID's structure, including creation of DEA committees and adoption of an agency. Why DEI dashboard and scorecard for its bureaus, missions, and offices. The upshot has been to racialize the agency and create a hostile work environment for anyone who disagrees with the Biden administration's identity politics, writes Primer-Ask, calling for complete dismantling of the DEI policy apparatus. DEI proposals. Eliminate the Chief Diversity Officer position in DEI advisors and committees. Cancel the DEI scorecard and dashboard. Remove DEI requirements from contract and grant tenders and awards. Issue an agency directive to cease promotion of the DEI agenda, including the bullying LGBTQ+ agenda. Provide staff a confidential medium through which to adjudicate cases of political retaliation that agency or implementing staff suffered during the Biden administration. Eliminate funding for partners that promote DEI practices and consider debarment in egregious cases. Return the authority over all civil rights issues i.e. D, to the agency's Office of Civil Rights Anti-Gender Reforms. Primer-Ask critiques schools. So, support for sexual and reproductive health and reproductive health and reproductive health and reproductive rights, gender equality and women's empowerment, and advocacy for individuals who claim minority status or vulnerability. That is a guise for promoting abortion, gay rights, and race. Base D, high policies, he suggests. He calls for replacing current officials who head up D's gender offices with pro-life political appointees and revising agency regulations to reflect pro-life values with a focus on family. Proposed reforms. Rename the USAID Office of Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, GWA, as the USAU Office of Women, Children, and Families, and refocus and realign resources to that office. Designate the senior gender coordinator to be an unapologetically pro-life, politically appointed senior coordinator of the Office of Women, Children, and Families. Eliminate over 180 gender advisors and points of contact embedded in missions and operating units throughout the agency. Rescind President Biden's 2022 gender policy and refocus it on women, children, and families. Revise the agency's regulation on integrating gender equality and female empowerment in U.S. Ease program cycle to remove all references, examples, definitions, photos, and language on USAID websites and agency publications and policies and all agency contracts and grants that include the following terms: gender equality, gender equality, gender equality, gender equality, gender equality, gender equar, gender aware,